before we get going on our usual sermon debrief, we are going to give a couple of minutes to Josh to talk about week one. It was a week ago today you started officially as a pastoral resident, and I'm not sure how much opportunity you had to talk about it yesterday. I encourage people to come and talk to you and Kyla about it, and maybe
he's still
they
here.
did.
He's
Maybe
still
they
here.
didn't. Yeah, he's still here, which is great. You survived. You well done. You made it through week one. Why don't you just take a couple minutes and talk about how the week was? Yeah, we want to hear from you. So
Yeah, totally. Yesterday was super encouraging, the amount of people. So thank you to everyone who reached out and said that they were praying for us. And we received text messages in the afternoon from people that didn't catch us. And so being able to just, feel that support from the church family and know that they are walking alongside this with us is super encouraging. So week one was great. It was a lot of getting everything, like wrapping my head around it and scheduling. Had the opportunity for lots of observation and meetings and phone calls and different things like that.
a little bit heavier too, in that there was an elders meeting Thursday, all-day elders retreat Saturday. It's not a normal week, but great first week.
Totally. It was a super formative couple of days just to see the meeting and then to see the elders reflect on goals and priorities as the leadership of the church. So, yeah, super formative in that way. Most of my time last week was spent in observation and in studying. So I opened a lot of books that were helpful for pointing out our need for spirituality and for godliness in our lives as ministry workers and as pastors. And so being able to be brought before God's throne continually and just say, God, I need you in this. I need you to go before me and to be sanctifying me was a continual theme, which I'm thankful for. It lays a helpful foundation that I don't want to move past, but ultimately a great start. So it's been a great week so far.
It's good. It's been good to have you in our mix. We've enjoyed it immensely, and we're looking forward to 103 more weeks.
Totally.
One down, 103 left.
Who's counting, Caleb?
Yeah.
That's great. We landed back in Exodus this past week in the life of our church, picking up with the fifth commandment in Exodus chapter 20. Honor your father and your mother, that you may live a long time in the land Yahweh your God is giving to you. And I took a little bit of a different pathway to the sermon this week. I don't know if that was helpful or not. How did that sit? I don't often like to deviate. I'm a kind of creature of habit that way. But as one writer on sermon preparation puts it, you shouldn't jump out behind the same bush every week because people will just know what's coming. But anyway, different pathway. How was that?
There was a book that was assigned to us in homiletics called The Homiletical Plot or something like that. And he talks about how, like, usually what a pastor does is he gives away what he's going to talk about. So people get it right off the bat. And that can help with attention and those sorts of things. So he actually recommends that sermons are unveiled as they go along, like the main point is. I would just say you probably just don't want to jump out behind the same bush every single week. It's helpful to let people know where you're going, to give them a reason to listen, and your applications to be the things that people are really looking for, as the text is explained. But yeah, no, I thought it was really effective. If you were to chart it, the sermon on a course, you're like, hey, we're information, application, and then boom, the big line, right? It's kind of that big reveal. So that was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Yeah, we'll mix it up.
You had in French, there's two ways we see sermons. So we said the American way is point. Like the summary at first, then I'm explaining to you why this is a summary. And the European version is like a spiral, and then you'll come to the center of what it is. And yesterday was that. Super helpful. We had we knew your sermon a little bit because we talked to you during the week, so there was no surprise there. But it was a good way to bring people. I felt people were tracking with you.
Good. That's what I was hoping for, because that is the journey I went on
Yes.
over the course of the week. And I was just like, I'm just going to go back up the path I just came down
Yes.
and say, let's walk it together. So,
Yes.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, very clear.
Dr. Rick Reed always says that tension builds attention, like Caleb was saying. And so Even just in that verse, right? How it's that it might go well for you in the land. We all open and we think, what in the world does this have to do with it? So I appreciated the way that you built up to it, and it brought us along wonderfully. So
Good, helpful. I will make one comment just about the act of preaching this week, and then we can do our kind of usual, how did God's word work in your life by the power of the Spirit, and then we can talk a little bit more about application, content, whatever you want. But I walked away from that sermon. I have I'm part of something called a company of pastors. It's just a small group of pastors, not from our church, but who are preaching senior pastors in the area. And when I got home, my kids all went inside. I sat on the front porch and I said, I'll be in a minute. I just need to sit down. I wrote to those guys and I said, brothers, like you scattered the word, the seed, you watered it. There's nothing else we can do anymore. We pray and ask for God to do what he wants to do with it. And I'm first in line needing to hear, I just need to trust him. And the reason for that is I was feeling very kind of raw, if I could put it that way, because I know that I had just touched on a whole bunch of tender areas in the lives of people. And I know that, I'm praying before the sermon that the Spirit would take the word and he would apply that. And that's not my job. That's but I'm wading into these very precious areas. And that's just I just felt emotionally kind of worn out from that and realizing, oh man, I have no idea what I tread on, what was touched on, and I needed a minute just to kind of recover, maybe, I don't know, for want of a better term of doing that. And just, Lord, please take and use your word. I was reminded of a phrase from the Valley of Vision, Book of Puritan Prayers, and there's a section for preachers and ministers. But the line is something to the effect of, Lord, help me open up the sorrows of your people and set before them comforting considerations. So when you do tread into those tender, precious areas, you want to make sure that you're setting before people hope of the gospel, the help of Christ, the treasures of God's word. Because if you do the one and not the other, that's rough. So anyway, I walked away. That was kind of what was going on in me after yesterday's sermon, and just a little bit of a pull back the curtain, if you will, look behind the pulpit at what happens sometimes after preaching. So anyway, with that said, thoughts, comments on how God was working in each of you, because first and foremost, this isn't just it's not just a mental exercise. It's not just content. We want to see lives transformed. So that's why we always start there.
Just a quick comment on what you just said. Different texts do different things in people's lives. That might sound like an obvious statement, but you think about like a Psalm 99, where it exalts the holy, the just, the good God, right? So you're preaching God's greatness, his glory, his wonder. You want people to marvel at it, bow before him, submit to him, right? So that's calling people to do a certain thing, right? Then you get texts like this where it's very, very practical. Not that the other one isn't, right?
Sure.
The other application is worship, right? And submit yourself to him. This application it's manifold. You're touching on so many different things. And those ones can feel vulnerable because you want to leave off. And I think this, I said this to you afterwards. You want to leave off personal preference and opinion, and you want to wade into a topic like this with the authority of the scriptures informing your application. Otherwise, it becomes hey, let's parent after Caleb's own image or
right.
Sean's own image or Sergei's, right? And and that's not helpful to anybody because different kids and different circumstances and stuff like that call for different wisdom. But there are things that scripture says about parenting. And there are, and we all have different experiences. I was even reflecting, before we got on this podcast about a variety of different responses that I got to witness after the sermon.
Yeah.
And so we want only the authority of the word can create that. And so whenever those sermons are preached, those are tiring ones because you know just how much that has done and unsettled and rejoiced and convicted, and it's tiring.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're just kind of right in the thick of that. You're not doing the work per se. The Lord is doing the work, but you're right there, kind of in that moment.
That's right.
And as the week went on, boy, oh boy, I had a page of notes, and it just kept on getting longer. The title I'd written at the top was Pastoral Considerations when dealing with the family. And the list just kept getting longer and longer the more I thought about just life circumstances, the actual people who are who make up our church. And you just realize, there is so much more than I was initially anticipating. And that just kept getting longer and longer. So if anyone was listening to this, felt similarly, then there's nothing wrong with you.
No.
I think that we probably all did to some degree or another. And that was just me in the act of preaching, not as a dad and as a son. So I had those components as well. But anyway, just helpful perhaps for people to hear those things. The sermon itself, what do you want to say?
I loved the last year 4 points on honoring. First, I love that you talked about like the weight behind that word, the gravitas of it. And, you used 4 different words as you think about honor, right? Respect, obey, support, and thank. And especially those last 2, support and thank. There was just some beauty, and my heart rejoiced in that. Even as we think about, we had prayed for someone who's caring for their parents right now in our service. And to think about the myriads of examples of people who are caring so faithfully for their parents and supporting them, and then all the other manifestations of that, it is a witness to those of us, as you said, who aren't doing that yet, who are maybe preparing to do that, who are looking towards that day. But people are setting such a great example. It just helps you to worship the Lord and thank Him.
For sure.
So, and then the thankfulness piece was, very. That was a good exhortation to all of us to be thankful for the work and the effort and the godliness of parents. So
that's good. I was helped to think along those lines in Kevin Young's book on the 10 Commandments. I rooted it in the scriptures differently than he did. There's many places you could go give honor to whom honor is due. Parents certainly can be included in that list. There's a whole other category for people who had entirely dishonorable parents,
that's
right? And that's a whole pastoral issue that we don't want to overlook. But the disobedient to parents, ungrateful list in 1 Timothy, those 2 are combined. 2 Timothy, sorry. So I was kind of rooting it there.
Yeah.
That as we honor parents, or if we dishonor them, we're going to be ungrateful. Those 2 kind of go hand in hand, it seems. And so I was kind of camping it out there. But I think that was helpful to me, and from interactions helpful to others as well. So
building off of point 4, your conclusion of sin and suffering play a hand in this, right? I found that the redemptive piece that you drew out there was huge in shepherding us as we think through ways that we haven't honored our parents as well as we could have. And just the forgiveness and grace, the sufficiency of Jesus for every sin and suffering. And of course, it's funny to listen to that and to hear it and to be able to see my parents out of my peripheral vision, right? And to know that there are times when we don't honor our parents as we could, but this compels us towards Christ. And just like every other law, it shows us our need for Him. So that spoke to my heart yesterday. It drives us to Christ and drives us to see our Father and our Heavenly Father, right? And the way that His example compels us to live out towards our parents too. So
praise God.
I wrote, authority is good.
Good. Glad you heard that.
All day.
All day, really.
I think the whole weekend.
Because we talked about it in our elders retreat on Saturday. It came up in the sermon in the morning, and then it was on display in the evening too. But keep going, Sergey.
But I think the authority in our lives, depending where you grew up, how you grew up, like that's like the first thing kids will do is rebel against authority, and so that creates in them a bad taste of authority. It's like as soon as they hear that word, or as soon as they they feel a little glimpse of that in their lives. They're we're prone to that, like to respond negatively to it. And I think that creates that when we have authority and where we're under authority, it's bad. It's a bad relationship, and we don't want that. Then our response is we don't want any authority in our life. But then that's very bad.
Yeah, which is actually impossible. We cannot escape authority because we're all under God's authority ultimately. So we can try, it's impossible, but the trying is very bad.
Yeah. I think I enjoyed just, I'm in the phase of parenting now in command.
You are very much
command,
there, yeah.
I have a little army of 4 kids. I'm like, man, I wish they were here this morning.
Why do we do Family Sunday?
I know, right? Wow, wrong Sunday.
James came home with a plate that says obey on this. But I was like, man, this is such a good exercise. And then I have, I think, a privilege of having kids that are kind of in that same period or how can I say, they're all kids, they're all toddlers, they're very young right now, and they're going to grow together.
Yes.
So my parenting style will grow with them.
That's right. Yes.
I'm thinking about you.
I have more of a spread.
Like my parents, they had me. I was 17. And they had a 4-year-old in the house, and I was thinking about that. I'm like, man, they had a hard job.
Mm-hmm.
They had to deal with me, who was a rebellious teenager, and my 4-year-old daughter, sister. So that was just a good exercise for me to kind of prepare me in parenting and just how do I make this shift, and then how do I make this command part easier for my kids to obey and to listen. And they say small kids, small problems.
Sure.
So
big kids, big problems.
okay,
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot to learn still. And
But let me pause you there though and say, the battles that you fight now when kids are young, if fighting them now pays dividends later. So as that authority is established, like that authority relationship is established, doing it now is so crucial. And we found in our own experience by God's grace that, yeah, there were a lot of battles fought, just to put it in those terms. But now when we're seeing the older ages, no, these things have already been established.
Paid off,
I don't have
yeah.
perfect kids by any stretch, and they don't have perfect parents. But it's worth it in these earlier years and stages to not give in expecting and teaching. No, this is the authority structure that exists, and you're expected to obey. Obviously, that you need to bring gospel into that as well, but it's worth it.
Stephen Ewell has 4 different divisions.
Yeah, talk
of
about
kids'
that.
ages, and the first one is in the stage that you and I are in, Sergey, is get your attention. I'm trying to get your attention.
That's right.
And that's been helpful to me, and you were really affirming that in different applications of your sermon, because sometimes you're parenting these kids who, I think it was like 6 and under or something, he said. And generally speaking, obviously, ages are variable, but sometimes you're parenting and you're going, okay, I have said this. When my parents say thousands of times, I thought they were just being like
Dramatic.
totally dramatic, like taking it like way too far. And I was like, thousands of times. Like my kid even looks at me while he does it for the 10,000th time because he knows he's not supposed to do. And I'm like, okay, am I getting through? Am I communicating this wrong? And we're just at that stage, right? Where it's like, okay, I got to get your attention. And so it's so helpful to hear from someone who's a little further along, and then grandparents like keep that up.
Yes.
Because so, I mean, the sermon did that for me again, as I think you're saying. I just got to stay consistent.
That's good. And it's I think it's important to realize, and I'm surprised I didn't say this yesterday because I say it often to parents, good parenting isn't always determined by what the children do, but by what the parents do. So you might have, like, at some point, our responsibility ends and theirs picks up because they're human beings, right? They have volition.
Yeah.
So we can't actually control our children. We can discipline, we can form, we can train, we can correct.
We wish,
right? But we can't And so I don't always look at, oh, there's that kid not listening to mom or dad, or because I'm watching mom and dad discipline them and remind them and repeat. And I just rejoice in that. There's some good parenting going on, and in God's kindness, that will catch on in the life of the child. But it may be not in that moment, and it might not be today. It might have to be 2,000 more times of saying the same thing. And you know what? We're so like our children with respect to God.
Yes.
How many
Amen.
times does God have to teach us to say thank you?
Yeah.
How many times does God have to teach us to say sorry? Will you forgive me? How many times is he, oh my goodness, it's over and over again.
Yeah.
And so if you're in a season of parenting young children and you're having to repeat yourself over and over, just remember how gracious God is with you to teach you the same things again and again and again.
I think that's the biggest thing I'm learning in this stage of life. Of, man, I'm exactly like James with God. I'm not listening. I'm doing what I think is the best, and it just it helps me to know that God is so gracious with me. That helps me to be gracious with my kids and to continue to be consistent.
Good.
So yeah, definitely kids bring a whole deeper level into ministry, leadership, life.
Sanctification.
Absolutely.
So, between us around the table, we have
And the listeners.
well, I just mean around the table we've got eight kids between us. 10 kids. Thanks for doing better math. Wow, math is not my strong. I was good at math in high school, not anymore. 10 kids between us. Was it clear and or helpful to? I was trying to set a sort of ultimate aim. This is what you're actually doing as parents. Did that come through? Was that helpful? Yes or no? How? If not, why not? And just can we talk about that a little bit? Because that was really the kind of sermon in a nutshell. Any comments on that?
Everything
I'm not
I
looking
do,
for like a pats on the back. I want to.
everything I do needs a purpose. And I struggle to do tasks with excellence or any sort of diligence if it does not have a purpose attached to it, or if I think it's purposeless and going to go nowhere. And so I need the gospel reminders in my sanctification. I need the new heavens and the new earth reminders in my suffering. I need these ultimate aims. And just to be reminded again, okay, we are parenting towards an end. Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
Good.
I think it was helpful to see that purpose was not for our own benefit. It was not for, man, what a great parent you can be if you do these 10 steps, right? Like we're parenting for this ultimate goal of the new heavens and the new earth. And I think if we just took all the parents yesterday morning and just put them all in the room with a coffee and just find something for the childcare for the kids, we'll be like, man, we have so much in common. And I think parenting, that's the kind of the dangerous point of parents isolate themselves and they think they're by themselves in what they're struggling and they feel remorse, they feel bad, and then they're scared to share it. Because like, oh man, I'm the only one who screams at my kids.
Sure.
I'm the only one, my kids never listen to me. I see all the other kids at church, they all listen to that.
Oh, I hear that many, many times. I've heard that.
So it's like, I think there was a common theme and I think as parents we'll talk about this sermon throughout the week. Hopefully we can continue to go back to this sermon in years to come. I think parents will find a more common space, and I think it was helpful for them. The grace that was there, the gospel that was there for them, encouragement, parenting with a purpose now. So yeah, I think you how can I say? You hit the right spot. I think it was could have been super heavy and be like, man, I can't do. I'm missing the mark. Like I'm a horrible parent, or I'm a horrible son and daughter, right? But I think
You are.
Yeah.
The hate, like to just put a fine point on it, you are.
It's in your heart.
But we have the hope of the gospel.
Yeah.
There's an interaction that took place this week that I'm aware of where one parent said to another parent, "Wow, your kid never does this." And the parent thought to themselves, and they were going, "You're right, they never do that." "Oh, great. Never noticed that. All I've noticed is these other deficiencies here." Right? And the parent who said it was wishing maybe that this was true of their kids. But the other parent was looking at them and going, "Oh, your kids never do this." So we're all dealing with different struggles from
Yes.
different angles.
True.
Right? In parenting.
Yeah.
And it's the grace of the gospel and that long view of towards the new heavens and the new earth that we need to keep in mind as the inevitable struggles with our big sinful hearts and our kids' little sinful hearts continue. So
That's good.
yeah.
I made a note here. I just enjoyed how practical, like it was a practical sermon. Applications were easy. Were like, and you were speaking to the kids that were in there. I mean, I think parents were listening too. Like,
Yeah, because they want to go home and quote the right. Did you hear what the pastor said this morning? That do you think that happens in homes? I think that happens in homes. But anyway,
Our
in
talking
mind.
kid misapplied that. I was telling him off, and he said to me, "Daddy, we're supposed to obey our parents. Stop telling me off." So, I don't know what he thought that meant, but
there we go. You never know.
he probably thinks he is the parent. Sorry.
that's right.
I'm the captain now. That's what. Is there things you, before we go to the second point of your sermon, was there things you wanted to say? You said there was a bunch of notes that you like. Oh, I don't have enough time.
Yeah, I would have loved to. I mean, I tried to take into account the sort of breadth or the variety of the congregation. Not everyone it was a parent, and it's interesting we're talking about this commandment given to honor your father and mother, but we're talking about applying it more as parents, which it was given to the parents first, not the children. They were to teach their children this, and we're to do the same. But there's just the variety of people in the congregation. I wanted to touch on a lot of things, and I think that happened, but you could have gone deeper with all of them.
Yeah.
The one where I had just sort of scribbled this in the notes in the side that I was even a little fumbly because I didn't sort of think it through fully. But I would say that one area that we would talk about a lot is, as parents, Meredith and I, is that whole tell them why piece. I would have loved to have probed that further. In fact, you guys have heard me talk about if I had an extra couple hours a week in my schedule, we would do a podcast called Parenting Wisely, WHY, spelling it that way, because we have found that so incredibly helpful. Just you can call it parenting philosophy if you like, but I just see it in the scriptures. I see it in this commandment. Do this so that, and the Lord does this with us all the time. And you know what? He doesn't owe us that. He doesn't need to tell us anything. He could just say, I want you to do this, period. Why? Well, because I'm God. But he doesn't do that. And I don't know any kid out there who actually enjoys, just like we did when we were growing up, why am I doing that? Because I said so.
Yeah.
Who likes that? Oh, yeah, give me more of that. I'll take it. Nobody likes that. So I find that very helpful. And again, I can't remember if I said this yesterday or not, but I say to our kids, we don't owe you an explanation for everything. And there's some things that you're just not ready for us to talk to you about. So you just have to trust us. But like whenever we can, even if it's we'll come back to that later, just do this now. We don't have time to discuss it, but we'll talk about it later. And so we just try to let them into our thinking as to why we do and don't do the things that we do. And I find that just very helpful. And so I would love to just probe into that further for sure. I didn't really address the person who had how do you honor parents who sinned against you in constant and significant ways? There wasn't really anything said to that person, which I would say I wish I'd had. I had a conversation afterwards with someone on this topic, and they weren't upset with me or anything like that, but it was just helpful to hear them reflect a little bit. And you know, there may be situations. In fact, I'm sure there are situations where the amount of honoring that you can do is to recognize that they were made in the image of God and by God, and in God's providence that they gave me life. And that might be it. And I wish I had just said a word or two to that individual.
I think that's why
yesterday,
it's good
so-
that we do this.
Yeah, for sure.
Quick question before we move on. Leaving and cleaving.
Yes.
This is a big
Wow.
issue, especially when it comes to forming a marriage. And so, could we just give a couple of quick biblical wisdom hits on that whole issue? This is where I think parenting gets tricky, and being a kid gets tricky because you've probably, not always, been under the authority of your household to some degree before the marriage took place. And now there is this radical shift that's taken place. When it says that a man shall leave his father and mother in Genesis,
So, and that another context is translated forsake.
yeah, it is
It's a
a
strong
very
word. Mhm.
strong Hebrew word.
Yep.
And so something significant is taking place there. And there are, oftentimes where that's a little less smooth than is ideal. So can we just talk about biblical wisdom as it pertains to this whole idea of leaving and cleaving? That's just.
I wish we had a newlywed at our round table.
No comment.
Maybe we should have the parents of newlyweds around the table.
we
next
should.
time.
I'm showing Zab right now.
What's the Google Map? How far to?
She can jump on a call and be on the.
It's true.
Do you say anything about this in your premarital counseling that you do, Sean?
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, Josh, you're the most recent ones I did this with, and I think you do too.
I do, yeah.
So I'll go first. You ask the question if there's anything you want to add, and you too, Sergey, if there's anything you think of. Yeah, I do talk about this. It can be a significant source of marital difficulty if
Yep.
it's not addressed well. And so practically, steps that I encourage couples who are about to get married to do is actually to take opportunity to express ways that they can genuinely do so, their appreciation for their parents, for their marriage, for the way they've raised them, those types of things. And perhaps even to say, here are things that I've learned from you that I would hope to see embodied in my own relationship. But to also, in doing those things, to say very pointedly, as I establish my own household and my priority becomes the Lord, my spouse, and then all of the other relationships follow under that. So I actually encourage those who are getting married to do something, whether it's you write a letter to your parents or at a rehearsal dinner speech or maybe even in a wedding speech, to say something like that. And then I'm usually talking, if there's parents who are in the church of the couple who are getting married, I'll usually just, yeah, your son or daughter's getting married, or how's that sitting with you? What's that? What are you expecting that to be like? Or those types of things, just to get a sense of where they're at and their thinking. And then I will also often offer to couples in a wedding ceremony to make those comments and to very purposefully and pointedly say they are establishing a new household today and their priority is shifting. Like going on record publicly, telling everyone, including you, this is what's happening and that it is good and pleasing in the sight of God. Mm-hmm. I emphasize that. That's what's happening there in Genesis, right? So those are some of the things that and then it just becomes in conversations with the man and woman getting married is that you might benefit from wisdom from your respective parents, but you should talk about things together as a couple first.
Yeah.
Before one of you goes and talks with mom or dad about it and then forms an opinion and comes back to your spouse and says, oh, hey, you have to shift your thinking. They have to shift their thinking. And then I think it's important for people to recognize that it takes some time.
That's right.
Right? You've been parenting this son or daughter for X number of years, and you have been that relationship, and that all of a sudden changes. Everyone needs a lot of time and grace and patience just to figure out the new lay of the landscape. So I just encourage people to be patient with one another. And if that continues to be a challenge, then you seek the counsel of God's people. Anything you want to add?
One of the things that we both say at weddings, and I picked this up from some of the manuscripts and weddings that I've sat under with you, Sean, is we'll say to parents, like, one of your biggest roles now is prayer. So, Sean and Meredith, pray for your kid as they embark, your kids as they embark on this marriage, because they're going to start making decisions. and they might go in a different direction than you would tend towards. And so pray for them and support them in that way. One of the things that we encourage in premarital is just a ton of open communication between the husband and his wife about their interactions with their respective parents, so that it never becomes, it's typically boys and their moms and girls and their dads. Typical. It doesn't always have to be that way, but those are the trends. And we say you just need to have the conversation initially that any sort of interactions that the other spouse is like, that might be violating what we've formed here.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be open about that, because it's when, the young man is, constantly talking to his mom about things he's not talking to his wife about. And she doesn't like that, but she's not saying anything about it. Oh, then that festers so just open communication about those things is so helpful right from the beginning.
I would say that I've been very helped in understanding this by the example of my in-laws, who if you want to talk with them about something, they will happily listen. But they will never offer unsolicited advice. You have to ask them, and they're supportive, they're encouraging, they're absolutely, but they never meddle in that way. They're there. We know they're there. They know we know they're there. And we can go to them, and we do that. We have that kind of interactions. We'll ask for their input, their thoughts, and that's been very helpful, certainly in some major life decisions along the way. But if we don't ask them, they'll just leave us to it.
Yeah.
And I actually really appreciate that.
Yeah, praise the Lord.
I was kind of hitting on this in the sermon yesterday, which is why I think you brought it up, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, you've got adult kids. Are you making it harder or easier for them to honor you at this stage of their life and your life?
That's right.
So it's good.
We read Children Obey Your Parents in the Lord, and we go, oh, just little kids, right? And so I just thought this was a key point that I wanted to bring up and ask some questions about. I loved the biblical theology of this verse and the way that you brought that out in the second point. You said, right off the bat, like, what does this commandment have to do with, like, why do we talk about land? And you brought us through a biblical theology. So biblical theology is tracing a theme throughout the scriptures, the trajectory of a theme, a main theme that goes from Genesis to Revelation throughout the scriptures. And there is this theme of land that you very much traced out over the course from Genesis all the way to Revelation. And it was beautiful how that brought that focus and that purpose that we talked about earlier for the whole parental activity. So could you just reiterate how Scripture takes us through this theme?
Sure, yeah. And so, the Bible begins with God's people in his presence in Eden. And then the Bible ends with God's people in his presence in this garden city. So not a garden like in Eden, but a garden city. Mm-hmm. So that's how the Bible begins and ends.
A place
And a presence. So in the presence of God in a particular place. And what was the original intention at the beginning was that Adam and Eve were as image bearers, and vice regents would then, they were to serve as sort of vassal kings, queen, and they were to represent and they had authority and those types of things, and they were to push the boundaries of Eden out, and that failed, and everything, the wheels fell off, and so to speak. And so from the moment that God said that one would come to crush the head of the serpent, Genesis 3:15, the trajectory has been towards the recovery of what was lost, which we find at the end. So all the way through, if that's how the Bible begins and that's how the Bible ends, well, I want to look for the ways in which that trajectory is traced and the movement from the Garden of Eden to the garden city of the new heavens and the new earth. And I believe land is part of that, is one of the steps in that trajectory, but not the ultimate end of that. The ultimate end is the new heavens and the new earth. So I was just trying to show that because of where we started and where we're going, the parental journey is in preparation for that. That has that ultimate goal, that ultimate aim. And so I'm going back to Eden. I'm talking about the promise to Abraham. Then you've got the promised land. Then you've got Christ coming and how the New Testament understands and interprets that, which is a disputed issue among Christians for sure. And I'm taking a very particular view, and not everyone in our church would hold that, and that's fine. I hope to convince you otherwise, but I'll just be candid and say it that way. So that's what I was kind of aiming at there. Maybe that's not very succinct, but
No, that was very helpful. Absolutely helpful. And it should. So, as Moses is conveying these commandments, I mean, the Lord to Moses,
Yes.
Moses to the people, very much in that land is promised land in view, right?
Yes.
But now, as Christians, as we trace the trajectory of that presence and place through the scriptures, that piece of the commandment has implications for us.
Mm-hmm.
It has an application for us because we look forward to the ultimate promised land, the new heavens, the new earth. Yeah, beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just to highlight this, I'm not spiritualizing the promise. I do believe that there is a physical new heavens, new earth, like the New Jerusalem is going to come down out of heaven from God.
Yes.
We're going to be resurrected, and we're going to inhabit a new heavens, new earth. I don't know the fullness of what that will look like, because really only we can imagine what it won't be like. There won't be this suffering, sickness, sorrow, death, evil. No eye has seen, ear heard, heart of man imagined what God is preparing for his people. But I do believe that there's a physical component to that. And so I'm not spiritualizing away a promise. I believe that the land is a type, and the new creations, new heavens, new earth is the antitype, the fulfillment of that. And that is in and through Christ. So you were saying it would have been helpful to summarize before we recorded, summarize that before and after the lengthy or that section. I was saying to the guys, I lost my 10-year-old. I lost her a little bit in that section of the sermon, and that's an indication to me that, there's a couple maybe points of just clarification or summary that would have been useful there. So,
No, that was helpful.
Any other final closing comments you guys want to make?
Nope.
All right. Thanks for listening to sermons. We trust our blessing to you. Thank you for listening to this podcast.
Anything special happening this week?
Yes, there are some special things happening this week.
Adult Fellowship. HBC Family Night is launching.
That's right, on Wednesday. Sunday morning. That's special. Always.
It is special.
The Ordinary Means of Grace. Sunday evening, we're going to have some of our missions family here.
Yep.
The Chattersons from 5 to 6. And then men, brothers, young men, 7 o'clock here in our church building this Sunday, September 22nd. I can't wait to have a conversation with you. Please join us. That's it.